here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be Chris D, who is best known as an American punk poet, singer, writer, rock critic, producer and filmmaker. Has been in the long-running LA punk band The Flesh Eaters, and also another band titled Divine Horseman, as well as various solo projects. And also he's done a lot of books as well, written on magazines, both fiction and non-fiction, and various other bits and pieces. So you'll find out much more about Chris in this interview. So after several minutes of interesting but casual chat, we get down to the exciting subject of the early formative years. Chris, it's over to you.
Well, I was listening to, I go far back, I had a transistor radio when I was a kid. And I started really listening to music when I think it was in seventh grade, which is, I don't know, comparable to UK school system, what that would be. But seventh grade, I was about, how old would I have been in seventh grade? Let me see, six. I don't know, about 12, maybe 12.
Right, 12. Yes, at that age. I think that means we've often gone from something called primary school to secondary school, where you've gone, from the age of 4 to 11, and then from that 11, 12 to 16 or 18.
Yeah, the way they do it over here. Well, see, I went to my parents were really devout Catholic, and they put me through a parochial Catholic school, which was the grades 1 through 8. Like over here, they usually do, I think they do 1 through, in public school, they do 1 through 7, and then 8, 9, 10 is junior high. Is that right? No, 8 and 9. I'm not sure because I didn't go to public school, but they have high school. So there's public school, junior high, high school. But I didn't go through the public school system. I went through the parochial Catholic private school, and it was like grades 1 through 8, and then grades 9 through 12. And then I went to college, university.
Yes.
And I ended up getting a master's and stuff like that. Majoring in film and with a minor in literature. But I was in seventh grade, and I had a transistor radio, and I was listening to stuff like, I remember I loved the song "Help Me, Rhonda" by the Beach Boys.
Right.
I loved Route 66 and "Walking the Dog" by the Rolling Stones. I just was really taken with the Rolling Stones. The Beatles, I thought were okay, but I didn't love the Beatles like I loved the Rolling Stones. I mean, even on the cusp of puberty, I still was more in the Stones than the Beatles.
So you didn't have that Ed Sullivan moment then that a lot of people often say, they saw the Ed Sullivan show, The Beatles, and it was a game changer.
Oh, I saw a lot of bands on Ed Sullivan. I remember seeing The Doors on Jonathan Winters had a TV show. And I remember seeing The Doors on Jonathan Winters, and there was a rope spider web behind them during their song. I don't remember what song it was. It was around the time of Light My Fire, or it was the first or second album of The Doors. And at the end of the song, Jim Morrison jumps into the rope spider web. He's all all tangled up, and so there was that kind of stuff I used to see as a child. Whereas as I went from child to adolescence. But I remember seeing, I can't remember if I saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. I remember they were on Hollywood Palace, which was another variety show over there. over here. They had a lot of revolving hosts. Sometimes Dean Martin hosted it. But it was a show kind of like Ed Sullivan, but it was on 9:30 on Saturday nights. And it was about 90 minutes. And they had a lot of bands on there too. I remember the Rolling Stones were on that, Hollywood Palace. But I saw a lot of bands on Ed Sullivan. I saw a lot of them on Hollywood Palace. And then we had some shows that were national music shows that were early in the evening, like 7:30 to 8 o'clock in the evening. There was one called Shindig, um, which I think Leon Russell was somehow involved in. This was back when he had short hair. Um, and he might have been the music director, or maybe he was just on it a lot. But I remember seeing him on there before he had really long hair and a beard and mustache. And um, there are other bands on. Shindig kind of had a little more credibility than the other one, Hullabaloo. Hullabaloo was kind of more like bubblegum psychedelic. And it was on before Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, which was, I don't know if you know that show.
Which one? What was that called?
It was called Rowan and Martin. It was called Laugh-In, like love in.
Right.
Um, and it's where Goldie Hawn got her start. It's where Lily Tomlin I think Lily Tomlin got her start on Laugh-In. Yeah. Um, there were a lot of other comedians that got their start on Laugh-In. It was kind of like there were just a lot of blackout sketches, and a lot of them had to do with the pop culture at the time. Rowan and Martin wore tuxedos all the time.
Right.
Else was in all kinds of costumes.
Because people like, was that Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis? Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis had a sort of show, didn't they, at one stage? But I don't know if that was if they were hosting or whether they were just a comedy duo.
Which one?
Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis, didn't they have a comedy?
Oh, well, they had a movie. They were doing movie collaborations, I think, from the very late 49 or 50 through maybe 56, 57, and then they split up. And then Dean Martin actually tried to be a serious actor for a while. And he actually was fairly good, but he kind of got out of that and started making stupid spy spoofs like the Matt Helm movies he did. And Jerry Lewis continued to do his solo movies. But yeah, there were more movies during the 50s. They didn't really have a TV show. But Dean Martin had a TV show that was on in the 60s. It was very popular, and he always had a drink in his, which we know now, most of the time it really wasn't liquor. He was doing an act. And they sometimes had rock stuff. Dean Martin was kind of a good-naturedly, kidding with a lot of the rock bands that he would introduce or be involved with. I remember when he introduced, I think it was the Rolling Stones on Hollywood Palace. He made a crack about their hair, some stupid stuff like that.
Yes.
But he was pretty cool, actually, Dean Martin. Frank Sinatra actually had a antagonistic attitude toward a lot of rock bands until later. I think Nancy Sinatra, his daughter, really kind of showed him, I don't know this for sure, but just it seemed like his attitude shifted. He started covering Beatles songs, for Christ's sake. So
yes.
And then, of course, Nancy Sinatra and Lee Hazelwood were together for a while, and Lee Hazelwood actually worked some with Frank as well. So I think that kind of softened Frank's.
Yes. Well, it must. I think it was. I don't think anyone likes to acknowledge it, but I think that moment where, you're no longer in the teen scene, on the cusp of the next generation, the next chapter of music or film or literature, or art, and I think some people can acknowledge it quickly and cope, and other people, I mean, you probably saw those interviews with Jack Kerouac, who was the great beat writer, but by the 60s, he was such a bitter man. He wasn't even that old, but he was slumped there drinking, smoking, living with his mum, hated the hippie culture, but you're thinking, you just couldn't cope with that transition.
Yeah, he's a strange one. I have my last ex-girlfriend, Donna, who I was with between 2009, 2013. She was born and grew up in Lowell, Massachusetts, which was Kerouac's hometown. And she was too young. I mean, she was about 13 years younger than I am. I'm 72 now. If she ever, she's incommunicado now, so she'll probably never see this, but I'm dating her a little bit. But she was too young to remember seeing Jack Kerouac around Lowell during his dissolute period where he was drunk out at the bars. But her father remembered seeing him out at the club, as her father would say, making an ass out of himself, being really drunk, putting his head into if there was a big tuba or something in a band at the bar, he'd go and put his head inside a tuba and doing kind of drunken antics, and it was kind of sad. But his burial place is in Lowell, and I remember she told me, and her friends would go to his grave and you know leave little tributes and stuff.
Yes, well, it's always nice to do. Yeah, but you would have been at that perfect age when you got to 16-ish, it's 15, 16. You would have been there for the summer of love. Were you conscious of that kind of musical, cultural change that was
Yeah,
happening?
uh, I grew up in Riverside, which is kind of there's a kind of twin city situation. Riverside is about 60 miles, is it northeast or southeast of Los Angeles? And Riverside is right about 2 or 3 miles west. I think it's west of San Bernardino. So San Bernardino and Riverside are right next together. San Bernardino had a music venue, really huge place called Swing Auditorium. And it's where the Rolling Stones, it was the first Rolling Stones gig in the US in 1964. And I remembered I think it was 64 or 65. And I so wanted to go, but I was way too young. Um, and then later in 68 or 69, um, I remember there were a lot of bands that were playing at Swing Auditorium, and I was still too young to go. My mom wouldn't let me go out.
Hmm.
Um, and I was in high school between 1966 and 1970. I graduated high school in 1970 and started college in the fall of 1970. And I was 17 years old. I'd started school, as a kid a little earlier because I was right on the cusp of being too young for first grade because I was already reading. They let me in. Um, so I left high school a little early because I was, because of that. But my mom wouldn't let me start going out to concerts alone until I was 17, which was, you know, considering how conservative some parents were. She was very conservative, but that was actually pretty middle of the road considering how conservative some parents were. But when I was 15 and 16, I saw bands like um I don't know who was playing. I remember one concert where Janis Joplin and MC5 were playing at the Swing Auditorium, and I so wanted to go, and I couldn't go because I was too young. I was still about a year too young, and a friend of mine who was a year older than me had gone. He told me about it. He told me Rob Tyner from MC5 took this girl down on the stage and started fucking her on stage. And I go, what, did that really happen? But no, but I didn't want to go for that reason. But there is those kind of shows I really wanted to go see. And then when I was 17, I started being able to go to shows.
So yeah,
Once
so that would have been the 70s. By then, things had changed a lot. The 60s had slightly crashed to an end. The Beatles breaking up, Brian Jones died, Hendrix, Morrison, Joplin all dying. So, and we had Altamont. So,
I went to one of Hendrix's last shows, and it was at the Swing Auditorium. I was 17. It was my first year in college. I was home for the summer, actually, between freshman and sophomore year in college. And he played Swing Auditorium. And it was so hot that summer, everybody was staying outside during the support acts, or a lot of people were, but there were so many people inside that we were worried about getting in, the girl and I, that we had gone to the show. And it was just incredibly packed. And we decided to go in right before he was going to play because it was so hot inside and outside the place. And suddenly they uh, closed the doors and stopped letting people in. And it turns out they'd oversold the auditorium. And kids were so upset they were getting these wooden barricades and starting to ram the doors with wooden barricades. And cops would suddenly explode out the doors, kind of chase everyone away, and then they shut the doors again. But the kids kept doing it, trying to get in because they had tickets. They had bought tickets. Um, anyway, the upshot is we never got in, and the cops finally came out with gas masks and tear gas. It started throwing tear gas at everybody. And this girl I was with was stoned on downers on Seconal. And I was trying to keep track of her and get her out of the way of the tear gas. I was not on anything. And we never got in. The upshot is we never got in. Hendrix was really upset that they oversold the place. He only played for a little over half an hour, refused to do an encore. I heard that there were so many people, there were clusters of people piled on the stage around him. And it was in the newspapers few days later. Parents were furious at the promoters for overselling the concert. And I remember getting a refund on my tickets because the
right.
promoters had to give refunds on tickets for people to get in. There was such they were going to get sued by the city of San Bernardino if they didn't refund people's money. So that was an interesting thing. But speaking on the end of the '60s, going in the '70s, I did see a lot of '60s acts. I saw Elton John around the Tumbleweed Connection time.
Right.
Um, I saw Leon Russell around A Stranger in a Strange Land. Well, it was between the first and second albums. Um, I saw Traffic around the John Barleycorn Must Die album.
Right.
I saw Led Zeppelin there, which they were kind of starting to go into the '70s by then. Um, but also, I was going to see movies. I was going to see bands in Los Angeles, and was going to the Whiskey A Go Go, which didn't have an age limit. You had to have you know, you had to be 18 to drink, but they still were letting people in.
Did you go to the Troubadour?
I never went to the Troubadour until much later because they had more folky acts, which I
Right.
wasn't interested in. Uh, I saw Rory Gallagher at the Whiskey. I saw, who else did I see? 1973, This was after Raw Power had come out. Iggy and the Stooges would play sometimes 3 or 4 days at the Whiskey back to back. Um, um, and this was after Raw Power, and they didn't really have a record deal because Raw Power hadn't sold. And I got to see that lineup of Iggy and the Stooges. This was around 1973. I don't know. I went like 3 or 4 days in a row and saw them, and they were just incredible. I saw the New York Dolls at the Whiskey. Um, I saw David Bowie, the Ziggy and the Stardust.
Right, my God! So you would have seen the
1972 with Santa Monica Civic. He played 2 nights. The band Silverhead was the opener. I saw both nights, and I was a total David Bowie freak after that. I went to see him at his Aladdin Sane show in the Long Beach Arena, which is closer hill to Los Angeles. Um, a little bigger place in the Santa Monica Civic. And I was in the second row at the Long Beach Arena. And right before they were going on, I was in front of the PA speakers, which were towering. And they had a momentous screech of feedback, which was really painful to hear. And it was immediately squelched. I don't know if it was a feedback from a guitar on stage or mic. They were still getting ready for the band to come on. But I actually got tinnitus in my left ear that night. I didn't get it from playing loud music myself later or listening to other bands. I got it from that show. But it was a magnificent show, that Aladdin Sane show. And I saw Bowie one other time. I think it was the Diamond Dogs thing where he did the 1980 floor show
right. Yes, that was.
at the Universal Amphitheater, which, to me, it was getting to be a little bit too much cabaret type
Did he have
material.
the cherry picker that came down, and he sort of came down on it, in the state?
I did, yeah. Yeah, and he was getting more into that kind of young Americans look with the kind of uh, disco outfit, and the more blonde coiffed hair than you didn't have the red spiky hair anymore.
No, there you go. So when you
Yeah.
got to that sort of early 70s period, then you were at university studying film.
Yeah.
And then, so what musically did you go for any of the Laurel Canyon singer-songwriter stuff at that stage? Were people like Jackson Browne or Neil Young, Carole King, any of those people on your radar? Or were you much more into the kind of blues rock world?
It's funny because I lived when I was going to my first year in college, I was living in a dormitory on campus for the first year. But uh, a sophomore year, I lived in a house that was rented by myself and 3 other guys down by the beach, which Loyola Marymount University, where I went to school, was in Westchester, which was right up against the LA airport, and also Marina del Rey, which is right, the Playa del Rey, the coast. Um, the university is about literally half a mile from the beach, and our house that we rented was on a block that right across from us was fenced off land that had been bought by the airport, and all the homes had been demolished because of the airport. And nothing had ever been rebuilt on there. You could actually get in there and drive around on the old streets. But the house I lived in with these other 3 guys, we were about 3 or 4 blocks from the beach. And forgot where I was going with this, but
No, well, I mentioned about yacht rock, not yacht rock, the singer-songwriters.
I know what I was going to. You asked about Laurel Canyon.
Yes.
Um, in my my junior year, which would be my third year at university, I was roommates with a couple who I knew. My friend, who was a teaching assistant. He was a little bit older than I. He was a teaching assistant in the UCLA film department. And his girlfriend wasn't in college, but she and he and I lived in a house in Laurel Canyon at the top of Lookout Mountain. And I lived there, I don't know, 6 or 7 months. And this would have been probably 73. And there were still rock people living in the canyon then, but I never saw any of them. I never saw them in any. There was a market down at the juncture down slightly past Lookout Mountain and Laurel Canyon Boulevard. There was the country store that was kind of famous. Um, and there were a lot of rock stars that were living in that area, but I just never saw any of them out. Like Frank Zappa's old house had been right on the corner. I don't remember when that burned down. It burned down at some point. I can't remember if it was still standing when I was living up at the top.
Yes. So what happens between finishing university and starting to write for? You started becoming a music journalist next. Was that your next stage?
Uh, Let me see. Well, in 1974, the end of 1974, I had finished college. I got married for the first time to my girlfriend I was with, who had gone to college with me, and we lived in Redondo Beach, Manhattan Beach, Hermosa Beach, kind of all over the place down there. Her parents actually had a lot of money. They lived in Palos Verdes. Um, but I was working, like in 1975, um, I was starting to go to night classes to get a master's.
Right.
And during the day, I was working at a pharmacy as a delivery boy, where I'd drive and deliver medications to, and this where I was working was far afield from the beach area. It was further inland around Inglewood, Ladera Heights, which was a mostly African American neighborhood. Um, and So I was delivering drugs during the day, around a lot of that area. Um, but towards the end of that period, after I was already not working there at the pharmacy anymore, I'm trying to remember the chronology here. It was around the time right after I graduated and got my master's in 77. My wife and I were getting a separation. I was living in Venice, down by the beach, Venice, California, for anybody on the internet.
Yes.
Not Venice, Italy, I wish. But anyway, Venice, California, by myself. And I had seen I had run into a copy of Slash magazine, which you're familiar with, I guess.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So Slash magazine, I had seen I think it was issue number one, or I think it was issue number one, actually. There was a bookstore called Papa Box, like Bachch, like the composer, Papa Box, that was Caddy Corner. to a movie theater called the New Art Theater, which is still there, by the way, and they still show weekly engagements of independent films mostly. But back then, they were a repertory theater where they would show different double features of, old films. So I was frequently at that movie theater, and I would also go, I'd get there early and I'd go over to Papa Box bookstore, and they had a newsstand, and I saw Slash magazine, the very first issue. I picked it up because Dave Vanian was on the cover. I knew who Dave Vanian was.
Yes.
Um, just 6 months before, my wife and I mean, we got separated pretty soon after we got married, about 6 months after we got married. But we had been in Italy and then in London after the Damned's first album had come out, Sex Pistols' first album had come out, the Saints, which of course are Australian, but you couldn't really get, I don't know if you could get their album in the US yet. Um, the Clash's first album, the UK version
Yeah.
of so I had already gotten the Sex Pistols, the Damned, the Saints, and what was the last one I just mentioned? I got those four. Oh, the Clash and the Vibrators album. I got those 5 albums, and I already brought them home, and I was listening to them all the time. And I was still listening to the New York Dolls all the time. And I was seeing the similarities between the New York Dolls and the Sex Pistols without anybody having said that yet. I mean, just the kind of the energy and the guitar sounds and stuff. Although the Sex Pistols really improved the guitar sound. But I was writing a lot of cut up poetry, like William Burroughs type disassociation, like trying to do cut up writing. And I'd sent some poetry into Slash magazine, even though I thought, boy, this is a long shot. They don't look like they're going to publish poetry, but my poetry was very abrasive, angry, it was surrealistic. And I thought, well, maybe they might. Um, and they didn't. But Philomena, actually, I just heard passed away last week. Philomena Winstanley. She was Claude Kickboy Bessie's girlfriend. She and he were the editors of Slash. Philomena sent me a really nice letter and said, "We loved your poetry, but we don't do poetry. Do you want to try and write a record review?" Um, and so I wrote a record review of I Gotta Write I Gotta Write, Give Me Some Skin 45 by Iggy and the Stooges. And that was my first piece, and Slash was the third issue. I think John Lydon was on the cover, still is Johnny Rotten
Yes.
Zona. And then I just started writing more and more reviews for them, and was writing with them until the very end. And by that time, it had crossed over to the label, and I was one of the first people hired at the label in 1980. And also the last year that the magazine was in operation, I was actually getting paid to work there, but not I was still doing writing and also helping to edit the magazine by then, but I wasn't getting paid for that. But I was getting paid to do the distribution, which we had all the issues, back issues included, stacked up in the storeroom on the ground floor. We had an upstairs office over this pharmacy on Beverly Boulevard in Martell, which was kind of below Hollywood and east of the Fairfax district. And I would be sending out issues to subscribers. I'd be sending out issues like I would roll up 5 or 6 issues, wrap them in brown paper with tape and string, address them, send them out to newsstands, to bookstores, to record stores that had ongoing subscriptions. We even sent some. I know we had some that were going to London.
Right.
That was about the only international um, destination that we serviced. But all over the United States, I would send packages out. I worked 4 or 5 hours a day doing that. So that was my first job at Slash. And then I graduated over to the record label when the magazine went defunct. And I was one of the first people at the record label.
Right. Blimey. So was it their record label that they started? You say you moved over to the record label.
Well, the last year and a half of the magazine really existed between beginning in 1977 through the end of 1980. So a good 3-year period. About halfway during that period, they had a publisher, Steve Samioff, and his girlfriend, Melody Niston, who was the main photographer, and Claude and Philly. Those were kind of the quartet that were the main managerial people there. There was kind of iffy if they had an office. They had an office briefly on the corner of Fairfax Boulevard and Santa Monica Boulevard, which is about 2 blocks north of where I moved when I moved to Hollywood. I moved from Venice to Hollywood at the beginning of 1978. And coincidentally, John and Exene from X lived 2 blocks away from me.
Right.
And I had already become friends with them because I'd seen them at the Mask. And my new girlfriend, she and I used to go see them, watch them practice in their garage. And we had become friends with them. But they had Slash Magazine had a brief span in this little office up there, but they really didn't have enough money to continue the office. There was a guy who was a friend of Steve Samioff, an artist named Bob Biggs, who had a lot of money, possibly from dealing with illicit substances. So I won't go into that. He began bankrolling the magazine. And
Right.
the publisher, Steve Samioff and Melanie Niston gradually kind of faded, although they were still, tangentially involved. The label started right the last year the magazine was in operation. They put out a single by the band The Plugs. I can't remember. I think they put out another single by somebody else. I can't remember who it was. I wasn't really involved with any of this stuff.
No. So how did you go from sort of being a student to a writer, then becoming a musician yourself? How was that progression?
Well, I had always wanted to do it since I was in high school. In fact, I tried to have a band in high school, and I really got rebuffed because people just didn't think I could sing, which is
Right.
true. But I had a very, you know, I was emulating. Now, when I say this, you got to understand this was before Rod Stewart did his Every Picture. Actually, he might have done Every Picture Tells a Story, but nothing of what came after, uh, you know, which I didn't really like at all. I was going by his Jeff Beck group, period. I
Right.
had Truth and Beckola. I loved those albums. I really loved his singing on those albums. So I was kind of going for that, somewhere between that and, Jagger and then also later, I mean, the British punk stuff and Iggy, of course, and David Johansen, people like that really had a major influence on my singing stuff. But I didn't really start trying to play music again until 78.
Right.
And I was doing Slash Magazine already, and I had become friends with a few different people. I was friends with Randy Stadola from the Alley Cats. He did a lot of self-recording. He had a 4-track. And I become friends with Tito LaRiva, who was just starting his band, The Plugs. And he became the first guitar player in my first iteration of the Flesh Eaters. There was another guy, I can't remember how we met him, John Ritchie, who played bass. Very nice guy, still around. Tito's still around. And then we had a guy, Joe Ramirez, who was on drums, but he played guitar in the Eyes,
Right.
which Kathy, from the Go-Go's first band. And DJ Bonebreak from X was a drummer in the Eyes. So this was like all very insular community of people, and on the Flesh Eaters I did some recording with Tito and those guys, but Tito left before we could really do any more recording because he wanted to concentrate solely on the Plugs. I had Stan Ridgway, who eventually would form Walla Voodoo. He was in the band for about 2 months. And then there was a band called the Flyboys that I had seen I thought were really great. And I asked him to back me up on I said, just for a few months,
Mm.
we recorded a single, which was the first thing that came out, actually. 4-song EP, came out in 78 on my own label, Upsetter Records.
Oh, was this in Disintegration Nation?
Pardon me?
Disintegration Nation, was this the single?
Yeah, and
Right.
there's actually another version of that ended up on the CD re-release of No Questions Asked, the first Flesh Eaters album when it got released on CD in 2005. There were a lot of extra tracks, and there were the 3 tracks that we recorded with Tito. So you get that version of Disintegration with Tito, you get the version with the Flyboys, and then all the No Questions Asked, which had different people playing guitar. Joe Ramirez from the Eyes came and played guitar on some of those songs that No Questions Asked. DJ Bromberg played drums on some of those. John Doe from X played bass on some of those songs. Carla Mad Dog played drums. She was from the Controllers. She played drums on some of the No Questions Asked album. John Ritchie played bass on some of those songs. So that No Questions Asked, there was just a, revolving bunch of people.
Yes.
That was from 1980. That came out on my own label. Um, and I was playing live a little bit, but I couldn't really keep a lineup together. Part of it was I had the job now at Slash. I was an A&R person there, and I was starting to look at bands and try and get that going.
Right.
And didn't really, you know, also, that was the end of 1980. I started to put together that second album, A Minute to Pray, Second to Die, which is kind of one of the most famous Flesh Eater albums now. And that had the so-called supergroup lineup that had John Doe and DJ from X, Dave Alvin and Bill Bateman from the Blasters, and Steve Berlin, who was playing with other people like Top Jimmy and other various bands, on sax, but he hadn't joined Los Lobos. That was still 4 years, 3 or 4 years
Yes.
away. So that came out in 81, and that came out through Ruby Records, which was a subsidiary of Slash Records.
Right. Okay. And you produced that as well, didn't you?
Yeah, produced that, was recorded in one night. We didn't do any overdubs except I might have redone 1 or 2 of the vocals. Um, didn't do any overdubs with any of the other instruments. my engineer was Pat Burnett, rather, not Barrett.
Right.
Ed was from a musical family. His father was um, Johnny Burnett, the rockabilly guy.
Right. Yes.
Honey, was he the one who originally did Honey Don't? But he did the train. He did a original one of the original versions of Train Kept a Rolling, and um, um, well, he had died tragically in a drowning accident. But his brother Dorsey Burnett was a country guy, and he has really fallen into obscurity now. But he was much better known as a country star in 1981 that he's remembered today.
Right.
Most
That's
people don't
interesting.
even know what you're talking about now if you mention Dorsey Burnett. But he was still having things occasionally chart in country back then. But his son was Pat Burnett, who was my engineer. And Pat Burnett had been the engineer when Joan Jett produced the Germs album,
Oh, yes.
Germs GI, um, which the Germs GI album was the only album out before My Minute to Pray Second Deny album. And right around that same time, X's Los Angeles album, which they had signed to Slash Records, was produced by Ray Manzarek. That came out either right around the same time as My Minute to Pray album or a month or two afterwards. Um, and But I continued to work with Pat Burnett at Quad Tech Studios, which was down on 6th Street and Western, just kind of south of the Hollywood area, starting to go, um, starting to go south. I don't even know what that area would be called, really. It's kind of around where Koreatown is now. I was actually kind of Koreatown already by then. Um, but Pat was amazing. I learned so much from him as a producer. He's a really
Mm.
nice guy. He loved all kinds of music. He was not a punk guy, but he had long hair, but he was just a really nice guy, really easygoing, very patient, really knowledgeable. Um, Upstairs at Quad Tech, they had a mastering lathe where you could actually cut your lacquer, master it and cut your lacquer upstairs. And the guy who owned the studio, Hank Waring, had this studio there for quite a number of years. And he had mastered some really amazing records up there, which is where we mastered most of the first Slash records in that studio upstairs at Quad Tech. But he had mastered Steppenwolf's first album with Born to Be Wild on it.
Mm.
He had mastered the Buffalo Springfield album, the one with I think it was their second album, the one with those great Neil Young songs, Mr. Soul and Bluebird and all that stuff. Um, there were a couple of other really famous albums that he had mastered there. Um, Not Pat Burnett hadn't mastered them, but I don't know if he was working there yet, but Hank Waring had when he had first had the studio. But we continued to master stuff there even when we didn't produce the whole album. We did
Yes.
the whole album there. So
And how did the album go down? And did you tour that album at all? Were you?
with my album, Minute to Pray,
Y- yes, that one.
we couldn't really go on tour because John and Exene, uh, well, Exene wasn't in the flesh either. John and DJ were still playing with X, and they were playing around a lot, and they were going on tour. Um, Dave Alvin and the Blasters, Bill Bateman, um, they had one album out on Rolling Rock. They didn't have their Slash album out yet, but they got signed to Slash around that same period, and eventually went into the studio, and that first album of theirs came out through Slash. And they were touring too. I mean, they were touring even before that, and they were always busy. So we didn't really have a opportunity to go out. We played a lot of local gigs for about 6 months.
Right.
Gig we played was that summer of 1981. We played a big show that I will always remember fondly. It was The Fall from UK. Got to meet Mark Smith, one of
Oh,
my heroes.
yes, Marky Smith.
The Fall, Blurt, you know, I don't know if you remember Blurt, Let It Blurt.
Yes, I did it. Yes.
Fish rides a bike. Great stuff. This was a great lineup. It was a perfect lineup of bands. And then the Flesh Eaters we opened. It was Fall, Blurt, Flesh Eaters. It's a big auditorium. But we had played a few other shows. We played a couple different nights at the Whiskey with the Gun Club. The Gun Club opening for us. Gun Club didn't have Fire of Love out yet. And we played a few other local bands and a few other gigs, but that was it until that lineup. I mean, I had other lineups of the Flesh Eaters throughout the early '80s, and then I started the band Divine Horseman with my then girlfriend Julie Christensen in 1984, and we got married, and you know that band was happening, Divine Horseman, until 1988. And then we split up, and then, you know, I had a one-up band, and then I started doing the Flesh Eaters again with other lineups in 1990 for about 3 years. And then I had other lineups again in 1977 through 2000.
Yes.
But 2006 was the next time that Minute to Pray lineup played. And we
So
got
did you, I mean, going back before then, you did Forever Came Today, didn't you, on Ruby Records?
Forever Came Today. Yeah, I had other lineups in the early '80s. I had a pretty consistent lineup for 2 years. Uh, Don Kirk on guitar, Robin Jameson on bass, Chris Wall on drums, Jill Jordan sometimes on backing vocals. There was the album Forever Came Today. That was actually the third Flesh Eaters album already. That was recorded, produced at Quad Tech as well. That came in 1982. Around the same time, I had been working with Jeffrey Lee Paris to get the Gun Club Fire of Love album. They had
Right.
they had about half an album already uh, done, and were shopping it around, that had been engineered by Noah Shark and produced by Tito Lariva. 5 or 6 songs that they were shopping around, demos, and but it was good quality. It was, you know, and I'd heard that, and I go, "Oh my God, this is so great!" And I told Bob Biggs, the head of the label, "We have got to get these guys in the studio, do another 5 songs or something, and put this as an album. It'll be great." And he took a lot of convincing,
Right.
but the secretary of the Slash Records, Robin Weiss, who was a friend of Bob's, she's a friend of mine. She was also a good friend of Jeffrey's, and she and I played that goddamn cassette of the Gun Club around that studio, that office all the fucking time. Drove Bob crazy, and he finally agreed to do it. So I took the Gun Club in, and we recorded 5 more songs and mixed it, and then remixed the stuff with Tito, their tracks they produced, you know, he produced with them. And then it became Fire of Love, and that came out around the same time as the Flesh Eaters Forever Came Today.
Right.
Yeah, that lineup, Flesh Eaters, we did go on tour in the summer of 1982, which is crazy. We did about, I don't know, 19 shows. And that was the only time that I really went on a national tour with the Flesh Eaters until 2019 when we did the Minute to Pray lineup.
Yes. So when you brought out A Hard Road to Follow, that was on your label as well. Was that
That was
the...
well, originally tried to get Bob to put it out through Ruby Records, but he didn't like it as much as Forever Came Today and passed. So I thought, oh, what am I going to do? And so I put it out. I had a friend of mine whose mom was like one of my, she was a mother figure to a lot of people in the punk scene. And she was really a great woman. She was like a political activist and just really amazing person. But she helped me put it out through my own label. Um, and
So did you
her,
call it
her
a date?
son-in-law, Byron Cole, Maria, she passed a few years, 3 or 4 years ago. But anyway, Maria had given me the money to get Hard Road to Follow out. Um, and but Hard Road to Follow, we didn't really tour with that album. We
Right.
were actually doing some of those songs already in 1982, but 1983 was the last year that that lineup was together, and we weren't really getting along. I was getting along with all the guys, but Don and Chris Wall, the guitarist and the drummer, they weren't getting along with Robin, the bass player, who also was the manager of the rehearsal studio. So,
Excellent. Yes,
and
that's always going to be tricky.
with all of them, but when we got together quite often, the first half hour or 45 minutes, they'd be like bitching at each other about stuff. And bitching about each other by stupid stuff, not just music stuff, but about marijuana and, you know, biker methadone and, stuff. I mean, you know, crazy, stupid stuff. And so and we were playing music super loud. I could never get Dawn to really turn down. And I really got sick of it. And that's why broke the band up in 1983, the end of 83.
Right. That was it. A Hard Road to Follow was the last one. So then how do you navigate the rest of the 80s at this stage?
How did I ever get one?
How did you navigate? What comes next on that front?
I wanted to do, I had already learned guitar well enough. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I could form chords. And I was practicing a lot on an acoustic guitar at home. And I wrote a bunch of songs, and they were more like John Doe and I and Dave Albin and Jeffrey Lee Pierce and even Keith Morris from the Circle Jerks, who was kind of in our circle of friends. We listened to a lot of other music besides punk music. We lost it. We listened to a lot of blues, like
Hmm.
old blues music, um, like black musician blues music, not white boy blues rock, but real blues music. Howlin' Wolf was a big favorite of mine. John Lee Hooker. We listened to a lot of country stuff, like Hank Williams, like old style 50s, 60s country, not the 70s like new country that was starting to come in. But even now, the 70s country looks like absolute gold compared to what's, you know, I mean, there's alternative country now that there's some good stuff, but
Yeah.
for a long time, country western just became a real schlock fest of homogenized, as did most pop music. But anyway, I'm digressing way too much. But I really wanted to do some kind of rootsy type thing. And it wasn't necessarily because of the Blasters or Jeffrey Lee Pierce or any of those people, but I wanted to do an acoustic type album. And right around that time, I had met Julie Christensen. I was producing one song for Top Jimmy for a
Hmm.
competition. The song he did was a song called Hello Walls by, it was a song by Willie Nelson. I didn't even know that Willie Nelson had written it at the time. I knew it because the version that Top Jimmy played for me was by Farron Young. And I was familiar with both Farron Young and Willie
Mm.
Nelson. Top Jimmy just didn't tell me, oh, Willie Nelson wrote this. So I just thought Farron Young for a long time had written that song. And he had Top Jimmy knew Julie, and he brought Julie Christensen to sing backup vocals on the session I did. And I thought, God, who is this? I have got to. Not only did I want to meet her and work with her, I wanted to marry her basically from the get-go, which is, we ended up in a relationship. But I had her come in and she sang backup on all the first Divine Horseman album, which was ostensibly a solo album, but it kind of de facto became the first Divine Horseman album. That was Time Stand Still. And she even sang co-lead vocals on a couple of the songs, but mostly she was backup vocals on that album. And then we started trying to do that as a real band with her and I as the co-lead vocalists.
Yes.
And we had I wasn't working at Slash anymore by then. 1984, right when Divine Horseman was starting to, the album had mostly been recorded independently by me.
Is that Devil's River, that the first album that you did with?
That was a little later. Time Stand Still was that first Divine Horseman.
Oh, right.
I had a Divine Horseman album. But that was, I think, recorded spring, winter, the January through March of 1980. I was still working at Slash through the first 3 or 4 months of 1980, but a edict came down from Warner Brothers, who had started to distribute Slash. They had distributed Slash from 1982 through 1984, which meant that those X albums, Los Angeles, A Wild Gift, the Blasters' first albums, the upcoming Los Lobos album, which they had just been signed, were starting to go through Warner Brothers. But Warner Brothers they were balking at whether they were going to pick up Slash to keep distributing them.
Right.
They were making money, but we really weren't making enough money. They were wondering if it was worth it. And meanwhile, we're all hanging like this is our money conduit. And so Bob didn't have enough money to keep everybody on. And there was another A&R person there who had come on after me, Anna. She had brought in the Violent Femmes, and they were an immediate college radio success story. And that album went through the roof as far as independent rock at the time. And I did not like the Violent Femmes. I wasn't a jealous thing. It was like I didn't like that style of kind of twee folk pop or whatever.
Right.
It was a little too cute for me. But she had brought in, the Gun Club was out already. I had also brought in the Misfits Walk Among Us album, which I remixed with Glenn Danzig. That had come out through Ruby. Neither Gun Club, Fire of Love, or the Misfits Walk Among Us sold shit when they first came out. They weren't selling.
Right.
And I also had produced the Dream Syndicate, The Days of Wine and Roses.
Oh,
that wasn't either, but people knew that they were going to be big, and Warner Brothers really tried to get them, and they got them. So I was supposed to produce an Extreme Syndicate record, but they decided to go with Warner Brothers, even though Warner Brothers was distributing Slash. So that was a big, or maybe it wasn't Warner Brothers. Maybe it was it A&M they went with? Maybe it was A&M they went with. But anyway, they got Sandy Pearlman to produce that, and it was a medicine show, which I'm not a fan of the way that record sounds, which is ironic because I used to like Sandy Pearlman's production of Blue Oyster Cult, but that's neither here nor there. But anyway, so I was kind of, up the stream with no paddle as far as what I could point to that had made any money for Slash.
Yes.
And I was quite often at loggerheads with Bob because he was wanting to take everything in a much more mainstream direction. He ended up getting Faith No More as the years went on after I'd left, which I wasn't a huge fan of them either. Some other bands like the Bodines were kind of like no reflection on them, but they're not kind of forgotten now. And he had another Bonnie something in the Wild Combo, which was terrible, kind of lounge pop. And that came out while I was still working there, which I was horrified. And she was a very nice person. I hate to say bad things about them, but it was terrible stuff as far as that. Um,
Excellent.
and there was some other stuff that he put out that I just thought was awful. Um, we weren't really doing that many Ruby records. We had put a guy named Mark Williams, who was a British correspondent for Slash Magazine. He was also very involved with a lot of, he was from the UK, and he was very involved with a lot of some of the British music tabloids too. He had brought in Lydia Lunch's 1313 album, which I actually mastered with Pat Burnett at Quadtech. That had come out on Ruby Records. That was one of the records from Ruby that I didn't produce, but I mastered. But anyway, that didn't sell either. So at least at the time, I don't know how it did later, but the only thing that sold really was Violent Femmes. So Anna got kept on as the A&R person, and I got let go. And I was supposed to produce the Del Fuegos album, which was about to be go into pre-production.
Mm.
And lo and behold, 2 or 3 weeks after I get let go, I get a call from Bob saying, I want you to come in and work with the Del Fuegos. I'll pay you week by week, and you can work with the Del Fuegos in rehearsal. Go, and they're going to rehearse 4 hours a day. I want you to sit there and kind of hone them and maybe can rearrange some of the songs. And so I said, okay. And it was going to be with the contention that with the ass- asserting that I was going to produce
Mm.
the album. And I got them sounding very tight. We condensed some parts of some of their songs. I didn't want to take too much of that away from them because they had a very raw sensibility, and I wanted to keep that. But I worked with 5 days a week for 3 or 4 weeks at least. At the end of that, Bob came to listen to them. He thought they sounded too raw. He brought in a guy named Mitchell Froome.
Oh, yes. Who did he work with Suzanne Vega, didn't he, at one stage?
He did what?
Did he marry or work with Suzanne Vega, Mitchell Froome?
I think he did, yeah. And he also did the soundtrack for a movie called Cafe Flesh.
Right.
And
Yes.
I was kind of, I thought, well, he's kind of new wavy. I won't bring it in this guy. But I was like, I kept my mouth shut. And when Bob goes, I'm going to bring in Mitch Froome, and he's got a little more musical knowledge, and you and he kind of work together. And so Mitchell Froome came in, and Mitchell Froome actually started to tell them what notes to play, which was way out of where I would have drawn.
Yes.
Yeah. And all my input was basically ignored from then on. And by the time it was going to be the first day in the studio, I went in the studio and I just thought, it was like I was invisible. And I just thought, okay, fuck this.
Yes. Well, absolutely.
I was going to co-produce the record with them, but why should I do that if I'm, and before that, the Del Fuegos have been very big Flesh Eaters fans and very loyal to me. And in fact, I found out later their manager, Lily, was the reason Bob called me because she said, we signed with Slash with the understanding that Chris D, who produced the Gun Club and Dream Syndicate, was going to produce this Del Fuegos album.
Yes.
We fired him, and he's not going to produce it anymore. So why should we stay? And she was pissed. I didn't find this out till 3 or 4 years ago when we were on tour with the Flesh Eaters.
Right.
Actually, it was 2018 when we played Seattle, and Lily came to the show, and we were just talking, and she told me that. I go, well, what? I didn't know that she had given that ultimatum. But I still didn't end up producing it, and then it ended up, and I even went in before Mitchell Prim came in. I went in and produced a demo with them at the studio I'd been working with, this other studio where I'd done the Time Stand Still album. I brought in Julie to do some backing vocals with the Del Fuegos. We recorded 3 or 4 songs. They were much slicker than the way they sounded live, but it still wasn't what Bob wanted. So I'd kind of been jumping hoops. But then when the album came out, I was really floored because it had really slicked them up so much. And it was, I sound like a broken record. I probably sound bitter. And if the band, anybody in Del Fuegos is listening to this, which I doubt, but unless they live in the UK, but it probably sounds like real sour grapes. But maybe it is sour grapes, but I think it's justified sour grapes because. And they didn't do anything too much after that, and then they broke up. They did a Budweiser commercial or something. So
Right.
anyway, so
Nice.
that whole thing left a bad taste in my mouth.
Well, absolutely. But then the Divine Horseman finished, and then you bring the Flesh Eaters back for the 90s.
Yeah, the Devil's River. I'd recorded that. We kind of recorded it on our own dime, and Julie and I were trying to get a label. We couldn't find a label to do it, and then SST of all people were interested, and so we did it with SST, and then we became an SST band basically,
Which was very cool in the 80s.
which I was with them for quite a while. I did the one-off band Stone by Stone that came out in 1989, which morphed back into a new lineup of the Flesh Eaters in 1990. Those Flesh Eaters albums in the early 90s were SST. I kind of wish now I'd been a little more circumspect on my contracts because I've been trying to get all that SST stuff back, the rights to it. I've been stonewalling that. It's very hard to get in touch with them. And also I had a couple legal people trying to do pro bono stuff who really didn't work very hard on it. And also the guy controls the SST catalog now with Greg Ginn. He's a lawyer, guy's a very kind of a shark. Ironically, somebody who helped a lot of bands get their rights back from big labels like Warner Brothers and people like that. But, when the shoe's on another foot, because I know there's other bands. I've heard rumors of Screaming Trees and some other bands are still trying to get stuff back from SST, but I don't know if it'll happen.
No.
In my lifetime, anyway. I've kind of given up hope that we're going to get that stuff back. And the thing that's really galling, they didn't do anything with it for years. I found out they recopyrighted the Divine Horseman stuff and the early 90s Flesh Eater stuff in 2014. And they put it up on YouTube and Spotify, those records, about 3 years ago. And I'm not getting any royalty reports of any of that stuff. So that's very galling.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Not a lot I can do. I mean, I can't afford to have high-powered lawyers go in and audit them and demand royalty statements. I'm sure it's not making any money. I mean, to be frank, I mean, SST really put a lot of money into Divine Horseman, and we went on tour actually 3 times, um, but it just didn't really, coalesce,
Mm.
fortunately.
So did you enjoy Reforming, or it was the Flesh Eaters Mark II for the 90s? Was this a good move for you?
Well, the first 3 years of the '90s, I was still battling a drug addiction on heroin and also methadone. 90 and 93, between 90 and 93, when those 3 records were, and I didn't get off methadone until 93, and I didn't get completely clean until 96. So I've been clean and sober since 1996.
How long
But,
had you been on those drugs?
huh?
How long had you been on those drugs?
Well, it was what broke Divine Horseman up, actually, in the end of 1987, because Julie got clean and I did not. It broke up our marriage. And I was very upset because I realized at that point, I'd always thought, well, I'm not an addict. And then I realized after the marriage and the band broke up, I'm an addict and I can't stop. And I was trying to do things my way. I was occasionally going to the 12-step meetings, and then I wouldn't go because I was so, oh, I can do this on my own. And I found out, no, you can't. You can't do it on your own. So, it took me 9 years to figure that out. So, but that's what it takes for some people. I mean, Julie was lucky. She got it pretty quickly, and she stayed clean since 1987.
Right.
So, 1996, after I got clean, she was remarried by then, had a kid. She'd also done some touring with Leonard Cohen. And, but I called her. She was living up in Ojai then. And I still had her phone number. She hadn't blocked me. And actually, we still had landlines then, so it was very hard to block somebody. But I called her and I told her, hey, I got clean finally, and I've been clean for a few months. And she's very happy, and we became on speaking terms again. Although
Fantastic.
I didn't see her for a couple of years, and then I went to see one of her solo gigs, and we started to be more in touch. And I had her come in. She sang on the Flesh Eaters lineup. I had 1997 through 1997 through 2000. We recorded an album in 1998, 1999 called Ashes of Time that I did on my own dime. My bass player, Robin Jameson, who ran the rehearsal studio, had a 24-track board in a little side room. He had 4 ADAT decks hooked together. It was a digital recording. It wasn't reel to reel. And I basically got to work as long as I needed to do that Ashes of Time Flesh Eaters album. And Julie came in and sang backup on some of those songs. And then I did another album like that of 9 songs in 2002, 2003. I was already working at American Cinematheque by then and didn't even have a live lineup
Yes.
for the band. I just had guys in the studio. We recorded 9 songs, and that was the last Flesh Eaters album in 2004. I got a deal with Atavistic Records from Chicago. Lydia Lunch had turned me on to them, and they were very receptive, and they reissued the No Questions Asked album, which I had the rights to on CD, and they reissued Hard Road to Follow on CD, which I had the rights to. They reissued Time Stand Still, the first Divine Horseman record, which I had rights to. And then they put out the Ashes of Time. Well, I had a lot of copies of Ashes of Time CD, and they picked those up, and then they they put out Miss Muerte, the Flesh Eaters record.
Right.
You
But
know,
then you recorded I Used to Be Pretty as well, a bit later.
pardon me?
You recorded I Used to Be Pretty in 2019. Is this another Flesh
Yeah,
Eaters album?
we recorded in 2018, really, literally about a month after we had done 9 shows. I had convinced the band when we were on that 2018 tour. I go, let's go in and do a new album. David, I have a couple of new songs, and we can record. We've been playing uh, Cinderella by the Sonics
Right.
as a cover. We had done that back in 1981, but we had never recorded it. And we had done it on the reunion shows in 2006 and 2015 and 2018. And I go, let's record Cinderella. We'd also been doing, since 2015, we'd also been doing She's Like Heroin to Me, the Gun Club cover.
Yes, a classic.
So I said, let's record She's Like Heroin to Me. Let's record some of the songs you guys did not play on A Minute to Pray, like Wedding Dice from the Forever Came to Die album. And then I took a couple songs from the Ashes of Time, Miss Muerte, the more recent records, and also a song from one of the SST Flesh Eater records, Youngest Profession, which is from the Drag Strip Riot album. And we recorded that. I mean, the guys were very open to doing an album. I was surprised. I was very gratified. We had been doing, I think the real kind of head exploding moment was when we were doing this killer version of the Green. I was obsessed with that song Green Manalishi by Fleetwood Mac.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
Green was still in the band. I loved the Peter Green era Fleetwood Mac. I hated the Buckingham Nicks Fleetwood Mac. So I wanted to resurrect that Green Manalishi thing.
Mm.
And they really liked that song too and thought it was perfect for us. And we were doing such a great version live. I thought, oh my God, we've got to record this. So that was really, and I thought, let's do this. And originally when we went in 2018 in April, we were just all going to we actually wrote checks and we each put in like $1,000 or something, which I could barely afford. And those guys I mean, even though they're regularly touring, it wasn't chicken feed for them either. And we started recording the album, just having the faith something would happen. The second day we were in the studio, Dave told me, look, I just talked to my label that I do all my solo stuff with Jimmy Dale Gilmore and blah, 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 Yep Rock Records. And they want to do the Flesh Eaters album. Unheard. They don't need to even hear it. And I go, okay, let's do that. And so we did the Yep Rock Records thing. And they put in the rest of the money, and we got to record the album and mix it and do a really incredible thing. And then they supported us on tour. I mean, they gave great tour support. I did 5 videos for that album, and we went on tour. When the album came out, it came out actually, I think, on my birthday on January 15th, 2019. We played up the coast through the rest of January. We came back. There was a couple gigs that other people had to do. The middle of February, we went to New Orleans and drove back through Texas. And we did Austin and Dallas and Houston. And maybe we'd done, I think, no, wait a minute. We started in I don't remember where we started. Maybe we also did Tucson and Phoenix. I think we did all that in in February. And then we came back in March and we started in Chicago and went up through Minneapolis and down through Detroit and Philadelphia and Washington, D.C., and then up to New York and Boston. And yeah, and did a whole, like 19 cities in terms.
Yes. So is that, and now that is, was that the end of the band at that stage, or is it
Well,
the end?
I had a feeling it was going to be. I was starting to do Divine Horseman again with Julie. And we had actually started trying to do it the year before when I was still doing the Flesh Eaters. But our bass player, Robin Jameson, got murdered on the street when he went in. He saw a woman being attacked on the street and he got knocked in the head by a crowbar, went into a coma, never came out of it. And he passed away.
So which bass player was that?
Pardon me?
Who was that? Who got hit on the head?
Robin Jameson. He had been the bass player in the Flesh Eaters, Forever Came Today, Hard Road to Follow. He had been the bass player on all the Divine Horseman stuff.
Blimey.
Bass player on the later 90s Flesh Eaters, the Ashes of Time and Miss Muerte albums.
Yeah.
And so when he died, we thought, you know what, let's postpone this a year. First of all, Robin just died. We can't, we got to figure out how we're going to do this.
Yes.
So anyway, we did the Flesh Eaters thing, and Julie actually came, and she came and flew out to some of the five big major cities that we were going to: L.A., San Francisco, Chicago, New York, and Boston. I think were the five cities she came to and sang backup like she does on the album. We couldn't afford to take her on tour for the whole thing, but she came out for those five shows, which she got paid for, of course. And then I wanted to do the Flesh Eaters thing again, but I was doing Divine Horseman. But those guys didn't have time. X was going to have to start touring again. But then, right after we recorded that reunion Divine Horseman album in October of 2019, was when the pandemic struck.
Right.
And that put the kibosh on pretty much everything. At the same time, Dave got diagnosed with prostate cancer, lung cancer, and was going through grueling chemo and radiation treatments
Yes.
year during the first year of the pandemic. It's unbelievable. I mean, he's indestructible. He's still smoking too. It's like whenever I see him, go, man, I can't believe you're still smoking. He quit. He quit all. He used to chug Red Bulls. I don't know if you know. Do they have Red Bull in UK?
Yes.
Yeah.
Red Bull, very, very, yeah, unbelievable.
Malignant, bad, evil thing. Just super caffeine, not good for your heart or anything else. But he quit all his Red Bull addiction, but he continued his nicotine. But when he got well from that, first of all, we couldn't do anything. It was a nightmare trying to find a label for that Divine Horseman album because of the pandemic. Even people that we knew were going to be receptive to us, they weren't getting back to us because nobody was in their offices or emails were so piled up that 2020 was just, well,
Yes, it was horrendous.
all over the world. So, and then, when Dave started getting better, I mean, it took him a good year and a half, maybe more than that. When he got better, he started doing the Third Mind band, which
Yes.
which is more of his kind of, I don't know, cosmic, psychedelic, Alice Coltrane, kind of experimental rock band. And he's done some stuff with Jimmy Dale Gilmore. I had actually asked his manager, Nancy, last year, a few months, like 6 months ago, if she thought we could do the Flesh Eaters again at some point. She said, well, all of 2025 is completely booked up with the Third Mind and Jimmy Dale Gilmore.
Right.
And I haven't talked to John Doe. I know John Doe does want to do it again. John is probably the one I'm closest to of everybody. I'm good friends with everybody. I know DJ would do it again in a heartbeat. I know Steve Berlin would do it again. I think Bill Bayman, I haven't talked to him in quite a while. I don't think he's doing anything. I think he'd love to do it. But Dave I think, is a sticking point. I don't think he's going to have any time freed up in the next year or two.
Yes, that's tricky, isn't it? So that's musically kind of where you're at the moment.
Yeah, I did Divine Horseman. We did two reunion albums. We did an album that was recorded in 2019, came out in the end of 2021 from In the Red Records. That was a double album. We did another double vinyl album with that lineup that came out in 2023, at the end of 2023. And we really weren't able to go out on tour. We weren't getting, first of all, even in 2023, the pandemic was still kind of winding down and people were very cautious about going out to shows. And also Divine Horseman just did not have the name recognition anymore that we did in the mid 80s. Julie and I hadn't done it since we'd split up. So from 1988 through 2021, people really weren't cognizant. So that was very difficult getting that started again, and it just didn't happen. We couldn't get decent play dates outside of LA. And Larry Hardy from In the Red Records, who's a big fan of my stuff, luckily, fortunately, was willing to do another Divine Horseman album, albeit a single vinyl album. But the rest of my band, Divine Horseman, they didn't want to do it. So, see, Julie lives in New Mexico with her husband, and she has to fly in from New Mexico. She has to spend money. She can't really, her son, Magnus, who's I think 30 or 31 now and is a budding actor, she was staying with him a lot when she'd come. And sometimes she'd get a B&B for a couple nights, but she was having to spend money and spend time.
Yes.
And drive rather than fly because she didn't want to fly. And so it was a big headache for her, which I can understand. So, but I was very determined to still do this because I had written all these songs for a next Divine Horseman album. Thought, God damn it, I'm going to do this anyway. And I'm just going to do an album that doesn't have any backing vocals. It's going to be stripped down, and it's going to be more like that Stone by Stone album, like after Divine Horseman split up the first time. Which Larry Hardy had In the Red, he was up for doing that. So I did it very cheaply. This new solo record that's going to come out. It's going to be out around Halloween. I'm sure you'll be able to get it there in the UK.
Yes. So is this a solo album or a Divine Horseman album?
It's not a Divine Horseman. I'm not calling it that because Julie's not in the band. If Julie was in the band, even if we had different people, I would still call it Divine Horseman. But I don't have any backing vocals besides myself. I used a guitar player, Larry Schimmel.
Oh, yes, Larry.
Are you familiar with him?
Yes, well, I did an interview with Larry. His sister's Patty, isn't it?
Patty Schimmel, sister, she was in Hole, and she's had other musical irons in the fire. But Larry, he played in the Flesh Eaters on the Ashes of Time album in 1999, and he and I had kept in touch. Um, he also played with Rocky Erickson the last couple of years he was alive. And then he played with Death Valley Girls. He was the only male
Oh, yes.
of the all-girl band. He was in Death Valley Girls for 3 or 4 years. Was on their first couple albums, to my knowledge. And then, as things go, he ended up leaving the band. It's an all-girl band now. But he hadn't been doing anything for a year or two, and I called him up. I called up my old drummer from Ashes of Time, Johnny Ray, who I had spoken to quite a while. And then Larry Schimmel and we had a mutual friend, Sharif Dumani, who's got a band called Exploding Flowers. And he actually has a 16-track, test cam in his rehearsal studio with a 16-track board. And we ended up having him come on and bass and keyboards, only keyboards on a couple songs. And then we recorded a 16-track in his rehearsal studio. We did that in December, just 8 songs. We were going to do 9, but we didn't really have time to work up. The 9th one was very hard musically, and we just didn't have time.
Yes.
I wanted to get it done by Christmas, before Christmas.
So it's all ready to go. Have you got the...
Oh, yeah, it's actually at the pressing plant now. It's going to be out around Halloween.
And what's the title of the album?
It's called Courtroom Wedding. It's one of the songs on the album. And the band is Chris D / Poison Fang Society, which is the name of a song that was on a very obscure solo album I did in 1995 that was all acoustic, that Sympathy for the Record Industry put out. And also I have used Poison Fang books. That's my imprint.
Yes.
I use for my publishing. So Chris D / Poison Fang Society, the name of the album is Courtroom Wedding. In the Red Records, it'll be vinyl, CD, single vinyl, 8 songs. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's going to be very exciting, actually.
Go on tour though, unfortunately. I don't have it in me. I can't deal with it. Can't deal with the trying to get bookings and the traveling. And also I've still not got COVID, and I do not. I've got asthma, and I've got other, got chronic fatigue already. I do not want to get COVID. I've managed to avoid it so far. So
Yes. Well, a life of being an asthmatic as well, which is hard work. So, yes. Well, that's brilliant. Well, Chris, I've got quite a lot. I know I haven't spoke to you about all your writing projects, but at the same time, that's a
yeah,
whole nother.
mention for all those who are listening, if you're still listening after all my I don't know,
Chat.
mouth motor mouth reminiscences. The collection of writing I put out in the end of 2009, it's called A Minute to Pray, A Second to Die, collection of writing by Chris D. I just put out a new edition of that, 2025 expanded edition. It's got 80 pages of new material. The book is now about 600 pages. It's got all the lyrics from I Used to Be Pretty through the Divine Horseman album, so it just came out, and the new album that's going to come out. It's got a bunch more dream journal entries from the last 5 or 6 years.
Yes, it's on. I see it's on your Facebook page actually. And is that? Oh, that's available from Amazon.
Yeah, I'm afraid Amazon is ubiquitous. I mean, if you want to do self-publishing, I have to tell you that they're very good as far as self-publishing because I get a royalty statement every month. I get paid every month. I get paid from multiple territories. I don't make a lot of money. I usually make an average of about 80, sometimes $100 a month, which unfortunately is not a lot of money anymore. But when I do a new book, my fiction doesn't sell very well. But when I did a writing for Slash book, which had all my Slash writings, put that
Yes.
in 2022. That did well the first few months. I sold quite a few of those. The first couple months when I do these nonfiction books, like Minute to Pray, is finally starting to pick up a little bit. Didn't do too well in July when I first put it out, but this month has been better because I've been begging people on Facebook to pay attention to it, and suddenly my crying in the wilderness has been heard, and I've been getting more people buying it. But and then I've got this big film book that I'm going to try and get out before Christmas so people can buy it for Christmas. That I'm going to hopefully have ready to send out to get proof during November and try and get it out by December 1st or first week of December so people can buy it for Christmas. The film.
Yes.
So
So actually, the writing
that
for
book,
Slash,
that book is called Humanity of Femme Fatales and Heartless Villains. So
right? That's another. Your books are very big, aren't they?
the novels are not so big. The novels are between the shortest novels I've done are like 110 pages, 120 pages. There's a few of my novels that are around 150, 160, 180 pages. We're talking, trade paperback size. Um, I like to do the length of books, like when I write my fiction, that's usually crime fiction.
Right.
I'm a huge fan of Jim Thompson and David Goodis and more popular people like Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler, and also tons of other more obscure people like Gil Brewer and there's too many to talk about, but really super influenced by those kind of people, especially Jim Thompson. And
Yes.
so I really from that hard-boiled school when I do my fiction.
So writing for Slash, keeping on that. Yes. Are you pleased with that? Are you proud of that? Looking back at it.
It's funny. Some of it I am, some of it I'm not. But I thought, you know what, I just need to put it out there. If you read the intro, if I don't know if you've seen the book yet, but if you see the book and you read the introduction, I go through a long list of adjectives that I describe myself as, and I list them in a single column. Um, like overconfident, um, and then other things, self-deprecating, uh, condescending, describing myself, um,
Yes.
uh, insufferable know-it-all, stuff like that, like kind of trying to be honest about the way I feel about reading some of my reviews. And then, I give myself some compliments as well, but I was trying to put it in perspective. So people reading it, particularly people reading a really bad review of something they love, will understand that I might not necessarily, like for instance, I gave a very qualified, almost poor review of Patti Smith's album Easter when it
Mm-hmm.
first came out in Slash. And I've got a little caveat after the thing in big, big bold letters. P.S. Patty, I love you so much. you know, like, in case she reads it, which not might not be that far fetched because Andy Schwartz, who was editor of New York Rocker, who did he did the one of the preface or the introduction, or, the foreword. He wrote the foreword. He's friends with Lenny Kaye and a lot of those people, he's from New York, so it's like he's
Yes.
friends with he knows all those people. I have other people that are mutual friends with Patty, so I don't know if she would ever read it, but I love her so much, and I love the way she is now. I love listening to her little, her little chats from her little monk set,
Yes.
where she posts from before she goes to sleep at night. I quite often will listen to her. Gives me, she's 5 or 6 years older than I am, and her dealing with old age and stuff really gives me, it calms my anxiety and my, it's very beautiful the way she lives, and I hope I can tap more and more into kind of the mindset she is in. But
Yes. Well, look, Chris, I'm gonna have to go to bed soon. It's getting quite late here,
oh
actually.
my God, we really talked a long time.
But I think this has been great. I've got the story, and yes, excited to hear the new album, which will be, I guess. Did you say it's been mastered and it's
I
now?
haven't. I have to talk. That we're doing one record release show here in LA on November 2nd, and the record's going to come out either the week before or the week after. Will actually be available, and I've got to talk to Larry Hardy this week and get a definitive release date. I know he wanted to put it out on Halloween, which is a Friday, October 31st. So I don't know if that's going to be the date or
Yes.
a couple days before that, or it's going to be a few days after that. So, but it'll be around Halloween.
And
So
just to confirm, this is the Divine Horseman, is it?
no, it's not Divine Horseman. It's Chris D
Is it
slash Bang Society.
right?
Basically a solo album, but I'm using the slash Poison Fang Society in case it sells like, it's on a run, without touring. It's just a phenomenon. It's a runaway bestseller. If we did get financed to go out on tour by some one in a million miracle, I would probably use the name Poison Fang Society as a band name. So
Poison Fang.
that's the reason I've got the slash Poison Fang Society.
Yes,
Not
it's
not necessarily that it will ever happen, but that's what we're the band name we're using when we play. We're going to do the record release show. So
right. Well, I'll be keeping an eye out on your social media platforms to find out more. But I
yes,
hope it goes.
bombarding everyone until there's a lot of, you know, coming out of their ears. But
Yes.
thanks for talking to me for so
Yeah.
long.
Well, thank you,
I'm
Chris.
really going when I'm, you know, when you flip the switch. So
Yes. Well, look. Have a great day. It's probably yes. It's getting on, and I'm going to go to bed. But look, thank you ever so much for your time. I'll keep in touch, and I'll look forward to your next album.
uh, midnight now or something.
It is midnight in the UK. Okay.
Thanks for your patience. I appreciate it.
Take care, matey. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. And that is the end of the interview. A massive thanks to Chris D for giving me the time for that. This has been the C86 show, David Eastaugh. If you want to contact me, you can on all the social media platform sites. Just do C86 show, my name. Also, all these interviews have been archived on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. So check out the others in this fascinating collection. Stay safe.